Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the another webinar of Moolya for the month of April. And this time around, we have Acsah Mathew, our lead ET, who have walked across many domains and have gathered many knowledge about context-driven testing. As Moolyans, who amongst us are Moolyans, you know that context-driven testing is in our DNA. And today, Acsah is going to present her understanding and knowledge about it. Over to you, Acsah.
Thank you, Shubha. Thank you guys for joining today and taking out time from your busy schedule. So I really hope that you guys get to learn something from here, and the time that you are spending here would be productive. So I'll just start with the topic that I chose for today, which is context-driven testing and exploring the hows and whys with scaffolding framework. So in today's session, I would be briefly talking about what is context-driven testing, and I would be spending more time on how we implemented context-driven testing for one of the international enterprise projects in Moolya using a scaffolding framework. So just a moment. So we would have thought about it, and the answer to this question is pretty easy as well. Like, why do gardeners use different types of tools to prune different types of plants? Any idea? If anyone has any idea, you can definitely message in chat or maybe even unmute and say. Are there any answers? Okay, so we are depending on the plant stem. Yes, right. So pruning is a process. First of all, I'll explain what pruning is. Pruning is a process of cutting off a particular stem or a branch or a part of a plant to make it more productive, or to shape it, or mostly these are the two reasons we prune a plant. So if you are pruning a rose plant, which is very delicate, you would use a different tool than when you're pruning a tree, a branch of a tree. So that you cannot really use the same tool which you used for a rose plant to prune a branch of a tree. Now, this is something, this is a real life example which I wanted to show on context. So the context changes and the tool changes. So what is context-driven testing? Context-driven testing is an approach which focuses more on understanding the context of a project and doing the best with the resources that are available. So now when I say understanding the context, it's literally in context-driven testing, it's literally like context is the king. That's what we believe. So instead of taking a set of practices which are followed in all, like which is being followed in different projects or different organizations, and just blindly implement it because this is how you're supposed to do it, that's the belief behind it. So instead of picking up some best practices and implementing it, we try to understand what is going on in the project. What is this software about? What type of team am I working with? What is the dynamic of the team that I'm working with? Or what is this business about? What is this business covering? What type of customers we have? These are few questions that we answer before deciding on the test strategy or the type of testing we should be doing. And also another part of context-driven testing is we do the best with the resources that are available. For example, if the requirement document is very limited, we try to explore ourselves. We try to ask questions from our end rather than depending on one document. We try to move out of the document and expand our areas of exploring and get the answers. And based on the resources that we have, we do the best testing. That's what context-driven testing is. Now, why do we do CDT? Why should we be doing CDT? Because like I said earlier, CDT focuses on context understanding. Now, context understanding helps in preventing bugs. So CDT focuses on mainly prevention of bugs with right questions asked at right time and a shift in mindset. So when I say right questions asked at the right time, we all know what questions needs to be asked, but we even need to ask it at the right time. So we rather than focusing on raising issues once the app is developed, number of issues reported is not as important as it is to prevent those issues during the requirement phase or during the design phase itself. That is the prevention that we try to do. It's more of a shift left mindset. Like we try to shift left, how can this particular issue be prevented at an earlier stage itself? That's the focus that a context-driven tester does. So software is developed by people, hence people set the context. So like I said earlier, there are some best practices in the industry that is followed. Like if like it's kind of defined that this is the best practice, this is how you should be doing, this is how you should be executing stuff. But that's not how a context-driven tester looks at things. A context-driven tester understands that project A has different set of people, project B has different set of people, and the set of people are not same, hence the context that they will set would be different. Now, if the context is different, the software developed in both the project in both the teams would be different, right? So the software, the approach that is taken by A might not be same as the approach taken by B. So that is something a software that a context-driven tester understands, which makes it even more flexible and easier for a context-driven tester to decide on various important things in testing. So in context-driven testing, project is understood first and then suitable test strategies created. This I have mentioned many times, like instead of when we start a project or when we start with working with a team, we don't right away start implementing certain processes like, hey, this is how it should be as a tester, this is a tester's job is this, or this is how a tester should be doing. Instead of doing that, we first understand the context, and then we come up with what is the best strategy that we can offer for this particular context or for this particular team or software testing or the testing that we are doing. The most important questions in CDT is what, how, and why. These three questions are something: what we are doing, how we are doing, and why we are doing it. These three questions are given utmost importance, and it's really important to have the answers to these questions. This last part is really my favorite point in CDT, I would say. A CDT, a context-driven tester, believes that quality is a shared responsibility of the entire team, instead of treating testers as gatekeepers. So in CDT, we don't really say that, if a testing is a bug leaks to production, we don't come back and say tester didn't do the job. No, it's not like that. There can be multiple reasons why things go into production. So we would first sit down as a team and think how we could have prevented that issue. As a team, what we can do to improve for future, so that this doesn't happen again. And it's a responsibility. When we do that, we try to convey this message that developers, product managers, development managers, designers, testers, everyone as a team is responsible for quality. And if this understanding is not there, a CDT would always try to influence people. They would try to influence the team with whom they are working, and they try to bring in this mindset that it is everyone's responsibility. to deliver at the deliver quality. So that's everyone's responsibility. Now, how to implement CDT? So explicitly, I'll like to say one thing here, that context-driven testing, there is no set rules on how we can implement CDT. As in, there's no pre-written recipe, or like one of my colleagues says, cookbook to implement CDT. What I'm saying here, what I would be talking about is how we implemented CDT, how we supported testers in a particular project to implement CDT. So we came up with the scaffolding framework to help the testers in one of a large international enterprise project to implement context-driven testing. How we did this, that is something I'll be showing in the upcoming slides. So before I get into it, like I said, we came up with a framework, and the name of that framework is scaffolding. So like, if many of you would be knowing what scaffolding means, scaffolding is basically a supporting structure in terms of civil engineering. If I say, that's from where the word has been derived. So scaffolding is a supporting structure. Whenever the building is being constructed, you support that building with a structure, so that the workers, they can move up and down. You can provide a lift to that structure, which will move the construction material from ground floor to top floor, and things like that. It helps in that particular process. That's a support that gives. The scaffolding is basically the support that is given to construction. So scaffolding, if we say, this is something similar to what we did in our project, in our context. We came up with a framework that supports the context-driven testers in our project. So like I said, implementing this framework, it worked for in our project, but for a different project, we will have to improvise and use the same framework in a different way, in a different project, because the context would be something which is totally different over there. But what remains the same are these 4 quadrants, which is context understanding, strategizing, execution, and influencing. These four quadrants remain same throughout projects. All the projects would have same context, same quadrants. Like you would want, if you want to do context-driven testing, you would definitely want to start with context understanding. Once you gain context understanding, you would like to move into strategizing. Once you are ready with the strategy, you can move into execution. And after execution, you would move into influencing. These four, this 4-step is something which is same everywhere. But how you do this would be something which would be totally different in my project, and it might be different in your project or in your team context. So if I start with context understanding, in our project, we started with, like, whenever this is a sprint level framework, so we implemented this in sprint level. So whenever we start working on an epic or a user story, first we try to answer these 5 questions, which are: what is your context understanding? Or basically, what is this ticket about, this epic or this user story? What is it about? Do you understand what it is? What is the business impact of this ticket? Like, if we are developing this ticket and if we are going to release it, what impact does it make? How is it getting implemented technically? What kind of implementation are we thinking about here? Like technical implementation, when we talk about, are we going to develop some APIs? Or what kind of design framework are we using here? What kind of design are we looking at here? What kind of interaction are we looking here? Such technical details, do we have that with us? And if it is a new feature or something which is developed, which is new, then how was it being managed before the implementation of this story? For example, we are releasing a new feature which enhances the project. right? Enhances the application that we are using, we are testing right now. And but then before releasing this feature, or before even starting to work on this feature, how were the customers using the application? How were they managing? Then why are we picking this story or this particular epic right now? Why, like, is there any any demand from the customer? Is there any blocking reason, like blocking issue, because of which our application is not being used, or anything? So these are the 5 questions that we start with in, to understand the context. Then once we have the context understanding, we move into strategizing. So in strategizing, this part, we try to come up with test charters. So for those of you who don't know what test charter is, I would request you guys to, reach out to Moolya team, who would, help you with YouTube channels, or, where you can see Moolya Way of Testing and all things. Because I won't be really spending much time here to explain those things we want to cover in this particular user story. And to decide what are the charters and what tests that are needed to be done in this particular user story, we try to refer to different models, test strategy models, or use heuristics. They help us to decide on what kind of tests can be done in this particular user story. So we capture those tests, and then we decide on what kind of coverage that we want to do in this particular user story. So for example, in our project, we defined it as shallow, medium, and deep coverage. Shallow coverage would be something like a user story which has acceptance criteria, and I'm testing just the acceptance criteria. That is shallow coverage. But medium coverage would be something in which, in medium coverage, I would even go ahead and check things which are not in acceptance criteria. For example, there are stuff written in acceptance criteria, but I know this feature is going to be released to customers who are going to use this in different resolutions, or, different browsers. So that would be medium coverage, where I'm covering things outside acceptance criteria. Deep coverage would be where I am going and testing many other parameters as well, such as security testing or performance testing, things like that. Like I'm deep, like going into the depth of this user story and trying to, get as analyze as much as I can in this. So these are the 3 different types of coverages. So once we have all our charters and tests, we decide on the test coverage. How we do that? How do we decide? In my project, we get on a call with the product manager, or development manager. We give them a walkthrough of the context understanding we have about the user stories, and then we show them this like the charters that we have. And one is shallow coverage, one is deep medium coverage, and one is deep coverage, and we discuss with them which testing is the best to be done in this particular user story. So based on that agreed coverage with the product manager, we decide, okay, we would want to do some medium coverage in this user story, so we'll go with the medium coverage. That's how we strategize. Now comes the execution part. So in execution, execution part is literally when the user story comes to testing, right? So in that part, we would, in that part, we would do some session-based testing or pair testing or mock testing, whatever is needed for that particular user story. Whatever we decided in the strategy, we would, execute them. We would run them, and we would capture our session notes. Like in session-based testing, that's what we do. We, time box our testing sessions, and we capture the notes while doing testing. And once we have the notes, we know, in our case, we paste it in Jira. In the Jira ticket where we have the test charter, we would paste the session notes. And once we have the session notes, we have captured everything. Then we would add the closeout comments in the user story itself. So I understand many of you might not be able to relate to what session notes is or what closeout comments is. So I would be giving, I'll be showing you guys some screenshots of how we do it, what session notes is. So you would be able to relate to it in a better way. So that comes in execution. Now, influencing, this part is something which I feel is really important, because I have known testers saying that our work is not really visible to people. Our work is something which we spend so much time in testing, but nobody knows, nobody gets to see that. So while I would say all these steps, if we execute it in the right way, visibility would be there. We would be able to showcase our work to the stakeholders, but influencing is something that helps in, showing everything that we did in a sprint. So in influencing, we send out reports to the stakeholders. So there can be two types of report. One is sprint closure report. Sprint closure report will include everything that we tested in the sprint, the tickets that we tested, the coverage that we achieved in those tickets, and if there is what are the issues that we found during those testing, that testing, or observations in general, what we found. Things like that we would add in the sprint closure report. In release progress report, how we are progressing with the release, are we on track, or would we need, is there a risk aligned with this release or not, things like that, and highlighting the risk. So highlighting the risk is something that we can do, it can be a part of the same report as sprint closure or a release progress report, or it can be a totally different document itself. But whichever way it is, the idea is to highlight the risk which is there in throughout the process. So when I say highlighting the underlying risks, I have added it in influencing, but I believe we should be doing it in each and every quadrant, starting from context understanding. When we ask these questions, when we brainstorm with developers, we would definitely come up with risks or problems, and we are going to highlight it from right from the context understanding part itself. So as a tester, we have to highlight the risks as well. So like I said earlier, the 4 quadrants, which is context understanding, strategizing, execution, and influencing, this remains same, but the way we are implementing it, that is something which would change based on the context. Now I'll show you how we implemented it in our in the project that I mentioned earlier. It's a big international project. It's an enterprise project. So this project has multiple testing teams, but we did this for a few of the teams. And how we did it is we came up with a process map or a mind map, which has a set of questionnaire for each and every sprint ceremonies and each and every sprint activity that we do. I'll be showing that to you in the next slide. Based on those questionnaires, we try to answer those questions, and then we try to come up with context understanding, like what exactly are the answers to that question, is basically something which is building my context. Now, once the context understanding is done, we meet the stakeholders to confirm the understanding and agree upon the coverage. This I mentioned in the previous slide also, how we come up on deciding the test coverage. Meeting the stakeholders is something that we do, and confirming the understanding. This is really important because the understanding, the context understanding that I got might be from a developer or a tester or someone in the team. But it is really important to confirm that understanding with the stakeholders, because they are the ones who actually have when I say stakeholders, it can be product manager, who would have even better clarity on things, right? So we need to confirm what we understand is right. So that's what is done in the third part. Now, this is the process map that I was talking about. This is a mind map that we came up with. So I'll start from the top. So whenever the sprint starts, we have a certain sprint objective. We have certain goals. For example, if it's a 10-day sprint, we would have like, we want to achieve X, Y, and Z. We want to develop this. So that would be the sprint goal. We wrote down the sprint goal here and added the name of the author here. Then we come to sprint planning. Sprint planning has, how to prepare for sprint planning. That's what this particular node means, preparedness. We go through a questioning framework. This questioning framework is basically those 5 questions. What is the story about? Why the story now? How the story is going to, have a business impact? How are we going to implement this technically? And yeah, so these are the questions that we have in the questioning framework. So we go through these questions, try to, try to capture our understanding and answers to those questions. When we are trying to answer those questions, we will definitely have doubts, and we would ask those doubts in the planning meeting, and we would capture the understanding as well. Then comes the daily scrum. So during the sprint, we have our day-to-day calls, daily scrum. In my case, in my team specifically, we don't really, go from each and every person and, sharing their updates. Instead, we go through Jira, and whichever ticket is in progress or in testing, we discuss that. So in that sense, the challenge that I was personally facing was I was not able to, participate in a better way. So what we did is to avoid such a situation, what we did is we tried to answer the questions like what we did yesterday, what we did today, and every day we would create daily notes, and we would make sure that we are ready before the daily scrum. Before we get into the meeting, whatever risk we have or what testing that we did yesterday, and if we have any issues that we found out while doing the testing yesterday, everything we would capture in our notes and we would discuss it in the scrum meeting. So this makes sure that we are, proactively, highlighting risks and, giving updates on the issues and, discussing things and keeping the entire team on the same page. Then comes strategy. In strategy, we do test design, in which, we go through the questionnaires, and again, we choose on what charters that we want to execute as part of this user story, and what level of coverage we want to do in this particular user story. That is done with the meeting with the product manager or the development manager, and what kind of tools that we will be needing or using in this particular sprint for testing the user stories or epics, and what environment we will be using for testing. So these are the things that we do in strategy. Then comes the execution part. In execution, like I covered earlier also, we try to add closeout comments. We again prepare ourselves. We go through, in each charter, if we want to execute tests, we go through more test strategy models or testing heuristic models to, brainstorm with more ideas on what are the tests that can be done for this particular user story. We try to do that, and we execute charters. Once it is executed, we add closeout comments, and in closeout comments we will mention everything, like what kind of tests we did, what are the tests that we followed, what are the observations and bugs, and which environment we tested, which version we tested, and everything. And then we would focus on what coverage we achieved. For example, in strategy phase, if we had discussed with the product manager that we are going to achieve a deep coverage, but due to some lack of time, we could achieve only, medium coverage or shallow coverage. We would, map those things, and achieved coverage is something that we will even we would communicate it to the team during daily calls, or in Slack, or even with the closeout comments. Then in middle of the sprint, we have refinement meetings. Even in refinement meetings, the questions that we have, we go for preparedness, we have a questionnaire. So for the questions that we have, it's the same as planning meeting. It's just that during refinement, we might not have all the answers to the question, but we try our best to do as much as possible to get as much as information for those 5 questions. And this helps us to be prepared for each and every story which is being refined. And this helps us to estimate the stories as well, in a proper way, because we have all the information that is available with us. And so based on that, we are able to refine as well and estimate as well the stories. Once refinement is done, end of the sprint, we have retrospective meeting. So retrospective meeting is something that we don't do. We don't prepare for retrospective meeting on the day of retrospective meeting. Instead, we take daily notes. Like if there are 10 days of a sprint, we will take notes each and every day. We do the retrospective each and every day on how my day went, what could have been done better, is there something that I can improve on, and things like that. The basic questions that are asked in the retrospective, we do it daily. And the most highlighted points in the sprint that we put in the retrospective meeting. So when we are doing things daily, when we are daily retrospecting, there is very rare chance that we will miss out something which needs to be highlighted in a retrospective meeting. So if you don't do it daily, if you just do things on the day of meeting, you might not be able to remember all the things that happened in the last 10 days. So it's really important to have a retrospective daily and summarize it on the day of meeting. Then comes the sprint closure. Sprint closure, like I touched upon in the previous slide also, we send out a closure report where we mention all the covered stories that we coverage, the stories that we tested, and the coverage that we achieved in that story. And if there were some challenges that we faced that we have been highlighting but has not been acted upon yet, we would put it in the closure report. That would be the risk that we'd be raising. And we would do some self reflection as well on what could have I done better, to improve the testing that I did in this sprint. So this self-reflection part is also very important, so that I would know what I could have done better, and I can do that in the upcoming sprint, so that helps to reflect on the things that I did. So like I mentioned in in the test strategy and refinement section, that we have 5 questions that we try to ask. So this is kind of how we started with maintaining the understanding that we have for a user story. For example, this particular user story is about accessibility testing. So there was some part of accessibility which was not implemented, keyboard accessibility. So before testing that ticket, during the refinement of the ticket itself, before the refinement of the ticket itself, what I did was I tried to understand what this ticket is about, how it is benefiting the client, and how this story is going to be implemented technically, why this story now. Okay. And before this story, how was it being managed? How was the client managing without this particular implementation? So this is something how we try to prepare ourselves for getting ready for test strategy. This is the context understanding part. Once we have this, we go to the strategizing part. So my previous slide, this is a continuation of this, since I cannot keep the entire sheets screenshot in one slide. I splitted it into 2 parts. So once this is done, all these are answered, we get here. We try to come up with test charters, which are shallow, practical, deep. So we try to add charters And then we, after identifying the charters for a particular story, we get on a call, with the product manager or the development manager. We give them a walkthrough of this entire understanding. And then we ask them that, hey, these are the charters that I identified. Do you think there is something more I can add? If yes, they would let us know. We would add that. If no, then the next question would be, what do you think? How much time should we be spending in this story? Do you think we should be doing a practical level of testing, or should we go for deep testing? That kind of discussion we will have, and we would have a agreed coverage. So the product manager would say, hey, we don't have much time and this story is not really that important, so you can maybe do a practical charter where you test the charters which you have listed in the practical case. So the agreed coverage would be practical. But then we did identify an opportunity of doing deep testing in this story. So just because we are not able to do it in this sprint doesn't mean we have to let go of the charter that we identified. So what we do is we would, mitigate it. We would create another user story for deep testing, and we would add it in the backlog. We would pick it up in the upcoming sprints whenever there is whenever we get time, and we would execute it then. But as of now, because of lack of time, we would cover only practical. And that would be the mitigation that we do. Now, when it comes to prevention, we would add all the issues while we executed the charters. What are the things that we prevented? What are the issues that we prevented? That would come in the prevention part. So this is the context understanding. And as part of test strategy, we also do test design. So just to give you a brief of test design, when there is a user story that comes for testing, not comes for testing, which has been planned for the upcoming sprint, not everything in that user story needs to be tested. Some of them can be covered in unit level, or some of them can be covered in, component level. And something in that is something which should be covered in exploratory level. So test design is an activity which helps us to identify tests in a user story and layer it at the proper layer where it can be tested, so that testing is more efficient. We can prevent issues, and we can have a better quality culture in our team as well. So what we do is, for example, there is a user story which has come for testing. We would create a test design subtask in Jira. That's how we do it in my team. It might not be something which is compatible for other teams. So we create a subtask of test design. We list down all the tests that can be done in that in that user story. Then we get on a call with the developer. It can be one developer who is working on the ticket, or your entire development team if it is a huge story and there are a lot of work in that. So we get on a call, we walk them through each and every test that we have executed. So that call is in the test design call. We are supposed to be more of a moderator where we just try to help. We just help them to brainstorm tests that can be done. We would just show them what test we have written, and we would ask them, is there anything more that can be tested here? So definitely during the discussion, they would come up with a few more scenarios that we might have missed. And mind it, we are doing this even before the development starts. So this is a huge part of bug prevention in a sprint level. Once we do this, then we come up at the next topic on how are we going to test it? Can the developer cover it in a component level? Can it be covered in unit level? And then accordingly with the discussion, fill this out. We would go through the PR, locate the particular test that has been covered in component or unit, and paste the link here, so that in future also, if someone wants to check, hey, in this particular story, what was the coverage, they can check the test where it was tested and the test where are the tests stored. So they would have all the information in this particular ticket. Then we also this was story level. This is story level, and this story is a part of an epic. So we would have user story, which will have corresponding test design to it, and we would also map it to the type of tests that have been covered in that particular user story. Then, like I said before, that I would be giving you guys look into what session notes, how session notes looks like. So this is a test charter that I executed, and how I did it is I did a time box session, a session-based testing. And while we are doing it, we cover our test ideas, whatever we have observed. And if there are any opportunities, while testing something, you realize, okay, there is something else, which is something, which is similar to what I'm testing right now, but I can't cover it in this test session. So I'll, test it later. So that particular thing is a opportunity for you. So if you have any such opportunities, if there is something that you have not tested or the issues that you have found, everything would be covered in the session note. So this is a test charter. Test charter has the session notes. Now, this test charter was related to a user story. So this is the closeout comment that we add in the user story. So what we tested, why we tested it, the testing scope is what we tested. Testing, like what the confidence that it gave, like why we tested it, it gave after testing, these are the confidence, this is the confidence that I got about this and this. Then the observation and the test charter link and the exclusion, whatever we did not test, the exclusions. So this gives a clear visibility of the testing that you are doing. So because a lot of times we think exploratory testing is just exploring, there is no documentation, nothing. That's not true. This is how we do exploratory testing, where the things that you are exploring, the things that you're testing is even visible to the stakeholders. Now, I showed how we implemented it, what scaffolding is. Now, why scaffolding? Scaffolding framework, it is a structured approach. By coming up with this framework, we got a structured approach and a process, to have better context understanding, better collaboration with the team. When I say better context understanding, the 5 questions that we keep asking ourselves before taking anything for testing, that gives us better context understanding, better collaboration with the team. While we get this comes in when we get in call with the product manager to discuss the coverage, when we do test design sessions with the development team, these 2 points cover those things. Helps in coming up with better test design and test coverage. I think I covered it in the first point itself, like test design, when we have the context, we know what tests are there, and test coverage, shallow, medium, we are able to identify better charters and, cover more without, I will not say without, but by reducing the amount of, leakage or amount of scope that is not tested, we can do that. Helps in being prepared for each and every ceremonies. So like I showed in the mind map, each and every ceremony, we are going prepared. We have the questions ready with us. We have the answers ready with us. And with the answers, if we have any doubt, that is handy with us. We have for each and every ceremony, as in even the daily scrum, we are prepared. We're not just going. So that is the influencing and impacting part that we are doing as testers. Scaffolding helps in approaching the 4 most important quadrants, which is context understanding, strategizing, influencing, execution. This can be done in a structured way. I would not spend much time here. I've already covered it. Now, helps in communicating and mitigating risk. Each and every quadrant makes sure that you are communicating efficiently and mitigating the risk that is there that you have identified. So it's not like you are, communicating the risk at the end of development, just before things go into production. You are saying, hey, this is the issue I found it, this is something we could have done better. No, you're doing it in each and every step. So that's a huge, prevention of bugs. helps in influencing the stakeholders and bringing more visibility to the testing activities. Like I said, the test charters that we create, the test design that we do, the closeout comments, the session notes that we add, this brings more visibility on testing activities. That shows that we are doing what efforts we are putting and how we are, approaching testing in each and everything. So I would like to close my presentation today with this, why we did this and how it helped us in, implementing context-driven testing in our project. And now I think I'm open for questions if anyone has any, questions to ask. So I'll be turning on my video because my network was not really good. So I had turned it off. Yes.
Hey, hi, Dimpy here.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. It was really nice and insightful. I really like the framework you have presented. Yeah, it's something similar to what we follow. I have a couple of questions here. What you have explained is like it's very well fitted into the agile cycling or like story level testing, right? So when we test a story, but what strategy or how you are actually fitting this approach when we need to test the entire feature, right? A feature may have multiple user stories and dependencies. Another question will be like, how you do the regression impact mapping, basically, and how that is actually fitting into this model.
Yes. So the first question, what I understand is, how are we doing testing on epic level? And the second question that I understand is, how are we implementing this on regression, right?
Right.
Okay. So to answer the first question, how are we doing it at a feature level? These charters that I have shown to you, if you want, I can just go to the charter. So the charter that we create here, this is, I showed this at story level. You can do the same on epic level as well. Ideally, that is how you should even start. If you have a proper well-defined epic, identify the charters that can be, part of that particular epic, and then try to cover it in the epic level, and then try which is not covered in epic level to cover it in story level. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
So, to quote an example, right now it is going through, like, that is something happening in my own project. So what happens is the stories are very granular. They are not really something that needs a deep testing or something, right? It happens most of the time. Like, the stories are not something that that takes a lot of time or has a lot of complexity. So in that case, what we do is we group 3 or 4 relevant stories together, which would make sure one part of the feature is implemented. The stories which make sure that one part of the feature is implemented, those stories we would group it together. We would add charters for those stories at epic level and test it at epic level. So let's say there are 4 stories related to each other. When when all these 4 stories are done, we would test it on epic level. Now, when I say this, it's not like we are not testing it at story level. In my case, we have developers writing tests. Most of our user stories are even covered entirely in component testing itself, so we need not test it. But if it is not covered, we test it in exploratory. If we don't test it, product manager tests it, designers test it, and then we test it at epic level. So again, this is something which is basically related to your context. Okay. So if you group things together and test at epic level. But sometimes what happens is epic level testing might not be possible because, there are huge things that are covered in story level and you don't really have time to do epic level testing as well. You need to focus on story level. So you do story level. So totally depends on your context. Now, for the second question, how we do this in regression. So in regression, there are 2 ways how we do it. First thing is that while testing these stories, while coming up with the charters for, sprint level testing, we would realize this charter is something that needs to be executed during regression, or this charter is something which is something which should be added in a regression suite. So we would, link that to the regression suite. We would try to execute it during regression. Or another approach is that which we do in some of the releases which are small, and what we do is we check the tickets that are going to be released as part of that release. Okay, and then we add charters related to that release. We can write new charters, or we can use the existing charters. So that's two ways of doing things. So did I answer your question?
Yes, you have.
Okay, thank you so much for asking the question. Anyone else?
Okay, if we don't have any other questions.
I have one more question.
Yes.
What are the tools you are mainly using for performing exploratory testing?
Tools that I am using for performing exploratory testing, I use a note making tool where I create the note. Okay. So that's a tool called, you can use normal notes, which is available in, Notepad, which is available in Windows, or Mac. Notes is available on Mac, or there's a tool called Obsidian, which I use for, taking my daily notes and the session notes. Apart from this, you can even use, there is an tool called X-Ray, which is really good for session-based testing. You can record your sessions, you can, record your audio clip, which can be used as a session. You can convert it as a session note later as well. So X-Ray is a good tool which you can use. And apart from this, I don't think I do use anything else. That's all.
So how you are capturing, suppose you have found some issues which are not reproducible later point of time. So is there any tool you are using to capturing those scenarios?
That can be captured using X-Ray. X-Ray does screen recording as well.
Okay, is it a commercial tool?
I think it is an open source. I'm not sure about it, but yeah, we can check it.
It's not the plugin which comes
Yes,
with
it
Jira, right?
is.
Okay, that is the one you are talking about.
Yes, it is. You can even use Bagasura, I believe. That's something that we have in Moolya, which can cover your test session. At least it can capture the screen recording while you're testing.
Are you using any tools to capture the logs?
Logs capturing, no, I'm not using anything as such, but I do have certain Chrome extensions that I keep open while testing. So if there is any issue, I just, copy it.
Yeah, one last question. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
How you're doing exploratory testing in production? So what is your strategy? What type of strategy you generally follow?
So, in my honest opinion, I should not really be spending a lot of effort and time doing testing on production. If I have done things on staging or QA environment, or if I have done things like test design, and if I have covered enough on lower layers. Okay, so that's what we are talking about, like shift left approach, where production is the last instance that we should be testing. So we test so much before production that we basically end up doing just the sanity on production. If everything has gone well and if everything is working fine over there on production or not, that's the level of testing that we do. So I don't think I would, that's again, that's about me. I would not really go ahead and have a scenario where I need to, have session-based testing on production or create test charters on production. So yeah, but you can do, it's again, if it's your case, you can again do the same things that you are doing on QA instance, same things you can do on production, if that is something that is followed in your team. Did I answer?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Indeed, it's really nice that you asked a lot of questions. It encourages the speaker. You don't have to say.
Yes. It does encourage, and it looks like Dimpy really listened to what I was saying. So thank you so much, Dimpy.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Aksah?
Yeah, one question I have. Srinivas here.
Hi,
Why
Srini.
do you term it as scaffolding framework?
So we call it as a scaffolding framework because this is a support that we are giving to context-driven testers. Scaffold. Did you join in the middle of the
No.
presentation, or you were there?
The question was on, like, did anyone term it as scaffolding framework, or you are calling it as scaffolding framework?
Did anyone term it as scaffolding framework? Yes, people did. That's why it is called, but not me. There are people in Moolya who, came up with this framework, including my manager in this project in which I'm working on, and other people. I'm not sure if I'm able to, I'm at liberty to disclose their names, but yes. So they were, exploring the ways in which we can support CDTs, context-driven testers, on implementing CDT in an efficient way. So that's how they came up with this word and this framework.
Got that answer.
Thank you for the question, Srini.
Okay, do we have anyone else? Okay. I'll take that as a no. Concluding the session, thank you so much, everyone, for showing up on a Friday evening of a very long weekend. I am sure you have taken back a lot of insights from Aksah. Aksah, thank you so much for coming up with this amazing presentation. Thank you for being there and presenting on a Friday evening for you as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice evening ahead and a nice week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend. Bye.